Okay, I'm going to give you a short review of Chapter 1, Understanding Economic Systems and Business. Um, I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see what I'm looking at. And this is the file I'm asking you to download for Chapter 1. If you go into your modules, always go into your modules and into announcements to find out what I need you to do for the week. But hopefully you've gone through each of the introduction pieces and you're now at Read Chapter 1 and you can download this file. Just download it to your desktop, open it up, and this is what you'll see. By the way, you'll see here there's also a link to the text online so that you can go in and open that up. Um, and it has most of the same stuff that you'll see in my chapter notes, but I have used these chapters, and you can see it opens up chapter 1, and you can see the different parts of the chapter here. But if you prefer to read like a textbook, this is more this is more like that. And my notes are a kind of a summary of everything you'll see here. So anyway, I just wanted to give you an idea of where you should be looking. Download my chapter notes every week, and I will give you a short review video on those, and you can highlight and make comments on your PDF file as you go through and listen to me or read through the material. By the way, this is Adobe Acrobat Reader, and I always use like the highlighter here. There's a comment tool, there's a draw tool, there's all kinds of little tools that you can use to annotate. So if you want to put some little annotations on there, like here, like a comment, all you have to do is click the comment button, click where you want to put your comment, type it in. And that can help you study, save the document, of course, and then you can study going back and looking at your comments. Okay, well, real quickly, what I've done is I've taken all the stuff in that, I don't know, 30 something page chapter and condensed it down into 9 pages. So I'm trying to make it where you can digest this stuff um, pretty easily. And also, some of the things that are in here are not over in that um, OpenStax text, or the data might be getting old in that stacks text. So I'm putting new data for things like unemployment rate or inflation or all kinds of stuff in here. So anyway, I started out. This is a foundations course, so it gives you a foundation of everything you're going to possibly study in business. So, from management to marketing to accounting, all that kind of stuff, all the functions of business. So the first chapter really is a foundations type chapter. It gives you a lot of definitions. So you can see here a business is an organization that strives to make a profit, providing a good or service desired by customers. So again, you can take and click the little highlighter if you want to go in and say, I want to take this amount and highlight it. You can highlight it in whatever color you want and come back and study it. So anyway, they're trying to make a profit. They provide a good or a service. A lot of our businesses now are providing services. But of course, a good is something you can touch. So I got examples in here like a laptop. A service is something you can't touch. Something like getting your hair cut or getting consultation from a lawyer or any kind of service that's provided to you. A lot of businesses provide a good and a service. So anyway, I gave you the definitions of goods and services. One's tangible, one's not. A lot of businesses are manufacturing businesses, but not as prevalent as they used to be. And that's why Trump is trying to bring manufacturing back to the United States. We've seen a lot of risk to our country, especially during COVID, when And now during this time where we're trying to work out tariffs, where, we need goods um, that are made here in this country. And so hopefully that will be the case, that more manufacturing will be brought back to the U.S. and we'll have more jobs here. Of course, that will mean that prices will be higher since they're not using lower cost labor in Mexico or somewhere else. But anyway, manufacturing businesses, most of our businesses now have some kind of service that they provide. And then, of course, we have marketing intermediaries like Walmart, for example, that takes a good from a producer, puts it on a shelf, and sells it to consumers. So we'll cover all those kinds of things all through the semester. You know what a profit is? If you have more revenue come in than you have expenses, then you have a profit. Otherwise, you have a loss if it's the other way around, and you really don't want that. So I gave you the definition of a profit versus a loss. Um, some businesses are not in business to make a profit per se. They're in the business to achieve some other goal. And making a profit, then they need to make a profit to maybe sustain themselves, but they're nonprofit or not-for-profit organizations. So um, that's just some basic definition type stuff here at the first of the chapter. Okay, this section here that talks about the factors of production. This is important. I need you to know the 5 factors of production or the inputs. What are the inputs, the resources that you would need to be successful in starting a business or running a business? And so here are the 5. In the old days when I was in school, here's what we were taught. There were 3: land, labor, and capital were the 3 main factors of production. You have to have the ability, not maybe to own land, but you have to be able to rent a building, or you have to have a place where you can work. You may have to have resources on that land that you're working. Okay. You have to have the ability to hire people, somebody to do the work. And then you have to have capital. And you might think of that as money, but all the things that it takes to do the work: tools, machinery, equipment, the facilities that you're in. So uh, those were the 3. But now they are including entrepreneurship or and knowledge as the last 2. So there are 5 that are considered now. An entrepreneur is just somebody that risks his or her money to start a business. And so um, that you have to have somebody with entrepreneurial spirit, you know, um, to make a business successful. And then knowledge, you have to have some talent and some skill, something you've learned in the past that you can put into practice to build a product or offer a service. So this has changed. So the factors of production are no longer really 3 that we used to learn, but now entrepreneurship and knowledge are part of that as well. Okay, so if I ask you a question about, what are the inputs or what are the factors of production that we would need to have to make a business successful, you can go back through this little section and reread those 5 factors of production. Of course, businesses um, have to work to protect themselves against external forces that could impact their business. And we see a lot of economic forces that are going on today with inflation having been so high. Um, Interest rates that had gone up at one time, employment rates, they're not as high now, but taxes and supply and demand. So anyway, there's some things like in the economy that could hurt your business. And I just listed a few of these, or they could help your business. Political and legal forces, of course, politics all the time. If the government comes up with a brand new law and it outlaws your particular product or the way you do uh, business or make a product, um, that can really affect your business. Demographics, you can read about, demographics is just things like age, gender, race, ethnicity, location. It could be like I'm getting older, and so I move out of this area to a place that has more um, hospital or uh, healthcare. So um, demographics, people moving around, people change, growing older, maybe um, certain genders. So um, demographics can affect your business. Social factors like people's attitudes, values, and lifestyles. If I want to eat healthy, then obviously I'm not going to be eating McDonald's. And so those social factors, if that were to change and people um, were to adopt those types of things in our area, then McDonald's would have to change if they want to stay in business. Technology, of course, if a new technology comes out and you don't have it, your competitor does. Obviously, that could be an impact. So I listed a number of things. Obviously, competition is an example of something you can't control, an external force. So I listed them here: external forces, economic, political, legal, demographic, social, competitive, global, technology. So all those are things that um, could affect your business. So we're not talking about internal things that you change. We're talking about things from the outside that can affect your business. This next little section talks about economics, and you're going to take an economics course or two. So if you take the macroeconomics course, you'll learn about a few things. We'll cover those things here in a minute, and then you would take the macroeconomics course. But um, let's talk about our economy here in the U.S. for a minute. Economics is just talking about the way wealth is created and how it's distributed. So that's all we're talking about on the definition of economics. How is wealth created in our country and how is it distributed out to the citizens of our country? So basically, when you start looking at an economic system in a certain country, you would ask these questions, what goods and services and how much of each will be produced? Who gets to produce those? What do they get to produce? How will they be produced? For whom? Who gets them? Who has access to them? Who controls the factors of production or who controls the land, the labor, the capital? So when you start looking at those types of things, that leads you down the road to really three economic systems that we're going to cover. There's two types really. One's the free market economy, which is what we have. Sometimes you hear it called the free enterprise system. So we live in a free market economy, and we'll talk about what that is here in a minute. But there are planned economies or command economies where the people don't have control over the factors of production. So we'll talk about those as well. So anyway, capitalism. Let's talk about it for a minute. Capitalism comes from um, the theories of Adam Smith, really, in The Wealth of Nations, 1776, which that ought to ring a bell for you that year. Um, our founding fathers adopted his principles that he wrote about in The Wealth of Nations. And here's the things that he thought a capitalistic system should include. And so, first thing, he said private citizens should be able to create their own wealth. You should be able to start your own business. The business that you create, you bring in money, you should be able, that's yours. Those are your profits. It doesn't belong to the government. So that's a premise, a tenet of his theory. Private individuals get to own their own resources. So we said a minute ago, the factors of production, who owns them? So if the people get to own the buildings, the land, the water, the minerals, whatever it is, if the people get to own those things, if they get to generate wealth and keep the wealth, um, that's a capitalistic system. Both buyers and sellers operate in a competitive market, gives them the freedom to enter or leave a market anytime they want to. That is a capitalistic system. The government is not saying we need so many barbers and we need so many butchers and whatever it is, and saying with these particular businesses can operate, these cannot. Now we do have laws in our country that limit certain things, but uh, for the most part, the government is not the one standing over us telling us that, okay, you can't start that hamburger business today. So we live in a free market economy or a free enterprise system. So here's the main thing, really. The role of the government should be limited to providing defense against foreign enemies, ensuring internal order, furnishing public works, and education. So what does that mean? Well, our government in the United States does tax us, which, that has not been forever either. So we've only been taxed for the last 100 years or so. But um, the government shouldn't take a big role in um, businesses going in and out of business, who should operate a business, what businesses should be um, allowed, and where the wealth should go, how it should be distributed to whoever earns it. So anyway, these are the basic four tenets that Adam Smith would have said, hey, you have to have these to have a capitalistic system. By the way, he called this laissez-faire capitalism. In other words, government stay out, no government interference. It's a French term that actually means let businesses do as they see fit, government stay out. So, yeah, I hope this is something that you're getting. Capitalism means that you get to own your own business, you get to own your own wealth, you get to own your own land. You have a say-so about how your business is going to operate, who you're going to hire. You're not being told by the government all these things. You will probably have competition, and you will get to make decisions about how you're going to run your business to compete. If you do well, you stay in business. You maybe run your other guy out of business or uh, have a better market share than they have. If you don't do well, you go out of business. So that's the free market economy. And then that the government, you know, is not going to be involved, should not be involved more than they have to. Now, many people would tell you that the government is too involved in business in the United States, and that is understandable. Um, but just, the taxation is bad enough, but regulation is a killer for a lot of small businesses, especially. So a government that can release um, its businesses, its citizens from having so much regulation on business um, sets it up to succeed. So that's a free market economy, a free enterprise system, a capitalistic system, all means the same thing. But what are the other systems across the world? Well, some of the countries out there still use a planned economy. So there are basically two types. So if your government only owns um, part of the industries in your country, um, then that's called socialism. And so it says socialism is an economic system in which the basic industries are owned by the government or it's under strong government control. So they might own all the factors and means of production, or they might own healthcare, or they might own transportation. And those particular businesses, wouldn't compete. That means that the government gets to set the price and the government gets to set how much is available. And so while some people think that socialistic healthcare might be a great thing, I can pretty much get in to see a doctor pretty quickly here in the United States, although our healthcare system has a lot of problems. If I were in a socialistic country, I may have to wait days and days and or stand in long lines to get to healthcare. So anyway, I listed some countries down here that have socialistic systems. Um, so communism is even more restrictive. So where the government owns virtually all resources and controls the markets. So Karl Marx was the father of communism, and basically the government controls everything. So you've probably all seen these kinds of um, scenarios where they say, what if you, what if we took everybody's grade in the class and, some people are making 90s and some people are making 60s, and we just averaged them out and everybody got a 78 or an 82 or whatever. The people that were making 90s would be highly upset. The people that were making 60s would be very happy to make 78. So same thing with the um, production of goods. If you uh, could make these high quality goods and had something that would sell well, but you're averaged out with everybody else and you get the same amount of pay as everybody else, then you have no real incentive to succeed. So communism is a real loser. Socialism has drawbacks. The best system that I've ever seen is capitalism, though it has problems as well. Capitalism gives you freedom to get in the game, and more people have come to this country and started a business and become millionaires, um, and will tell you over and over and over they're not going back to a system where the government has control over everything they do. So anyway, the United States, of course, has some things that are controlled by the government. We've seen healthcare be one of the things that the government has stepped in uh, lately and tried to get involved in more. But countries like Canada, Sweden, United Kingdom, so Great Britain, they're more of a mixed economy, and so is the United States. Really is moving more toward a mixed economy. We are still a capitalistic system, but we see, a lot of times the government has moved in and tried to tweak something, and usually they end up messing it up. Um, Okay, so know the difference between free enterprise, free market economy versus planned economy, socialism, and communism. Um, okay, I'm going down here to, I'm scrolling down because this video is going to get too long. Again, you're going to have a course you take on macroeconomics, and you're going to have one on microeconomics. Um, Macroeconomics is just looking at the economy as a whole and how do we know our economy is functioning well or not? Well, one of the ways you can do it is look at our GDP. How much do we produce? So this is the definition. GDP is the market value of all goods and services produced within a nation's border in a year. So let me see. Over here, I have a here's a chart of the GDP starting from about 1950 all the way through, I don't know, 2020, 2024. So you can see in 2024, you can see here we had, this is in billions, so that's $29 trillion worth of GDP, gross domestic product. So in other words, if you take a look at this, we're not a manufacturing country anymore like we used to be, but we still manufacture goods and services. You can see that it's been pretty much straight up since the 70s, but the only time we had a real downturn was, of course, in the pandemic. So when COVID hit in 2020, and we saw a dropout in the amount that was produced because people weren't allowed into work most of the time. But anyway, you can see here, I put the new numbers in, $29 trillion growth rate of 2.5%. We still have a healthy economy. Of course, president is trying to get more um, manufacturing to come back to this country. And when that happens, GDP will continue to grow. Um, businesses always go through a cycle. So, there's a business will go through a peak cycle where they have, high growth and high sales and et cetera. Well, same thing with countries. And so we've gone through peak prosperity where we had low unemployment. People are willing to buy products. We've gone through recessions. Recession is just two or more 3-month periods of decline in GDP. So you start to see when GDP starts falling off, the amount that we produce in a year, you start to see the country uh, pull back a little bit and its ability to produce. Your country could go into a depression, so it lasts longer than a recession. It has high employment rates. So, I mean, if you had, a year's worth of GDP going down and high unemployment, high inflation, you would say, okay, we're moving out of a recession probably into a depression. Uh, so some businesses and our country can go through a trough and then try to come back out the other side and recover. And usually it takes um, policy to make that happen. Something has to happen for the country to turn around. So anyway, we will cover the product life cycle later, but businesses go through a cycle, countries go through a cycle. At this point, where are we? Well, from what you saw over in the chart a minute ago, we're looking really good on GDP. But let me just kind of run through. Here's real GDP. If you adjust it for inflation, you can see it's 2.5% in 2024, the last year there. Um, let's see. This is personal income. You can see that personal income has grown. So continues to grow. And we may gripe about how much we don't make on our job or whatever it is, but in reality, we're making more than our ancestors could have ever thought. Our granddads could have ever thought about making. So, um, if you take a look at unemployment, this is an indicator of whether your country is doing well or not, your economy is doing well or not. And you can see, I'll just pull across the end here. This was in April of 2025. We had a 4% unemployment rate. That means that out of everybody that wants to work, 4 out of 100 are not able to find work. 4 out of 100. That's pretty dang good. So, if you take a look back since 1950, we've had some periods of really high unemployment. So, if you look, of course, in 2010, we had 10%. 2009, we had 10% unemployment. And then these are pretty recent. So, this is the pandemic, 15%. 15 out of 100 couldn't find work. So, if you're thinking about is our country healthy at the moment? The unemployment rate is down. The gross domestic product continues to grow. We're making more than we've ever made, product wise. If you look at the consumer price index, that's just looking at like a basket of groceries compared now to last year. So measure the average change over time in the prices paid by consumers for a market basket of consumer goods. So you can look at things like food. Well, you know this just intuitively from going to the store and trying to purchase groceries this year, and they cost more than last year. So you can see it's about up 3%. But it's hard to believe energy is down nearly 4%. So gas, for example, if you go to buy gasoline, it's lower now than it's been in a long time. Um, so anyway, I just wanted to show you, I know that it feels like the prices of things are very high now, but if you look at the consumer price index, and by the way, I have this in your notes. I have like an unemployment rate, and it kind of gives you an idea of what it is now. Um, Inflation, or inflation. When I'm talking about consumer price index, I'm talking about really inflation. So inflation in the United States, 2.9% in 2024. So in other words, things went up 3 cents for every dollar. And you might say, but I know when I go to the store, I'm paying way more than I paid before. Yeah, but not on everything. Eggs, for example, were just outrageous because of bird flu, and we paid way higher prices for eggs. But that balanced out with other products that we paid um, the same or less for. Okay, well, anyway, consumer price index, you can look at that. Um, so those are all indicators of whether our country is doing well, and our country is doing well. Of course, there are always ways to improve. Um, I'm going to just move on down, keep moving down. Here's the federal debt. Federal debt every year, deficit every year occurs because the government spends more than it takes in. So last year, the government brought in $4.9 trillion in taxes, but they spent 6.8 trillion. So, I mean, you take a look at that and you say, well, I can't run my household that way. So why would our government run that way? It's crazy. So anyway, last year we had a deficit of $1.8 trillion. That's just unbelievable. And how does a government pay for all that stuff? Well, they issue T-bills, treasury bills, bonds where people can invest and they will spend $100 on a bond, whatever it is, $100,000 on bonds, and the government takes and uses that money and pays you interest on the bond. So that happens every year. Every year we have a national debt. A federal deficit. So let me see if I can go over here and find you one of those. So here's the information from last year, what they spent it on and where they got the money from. Um, so you can see the government spends a lot of money on Social Security. Well, why do you think that's going to go down? No, that's not going to go down because we have this group of um, uh, older people that are going through the system, boomers that are going through the system, and they're going to be applying for Social Security, and they're going to need health care. You can see those things here: Medicare, Medicaid. So once you start putting all that together, I mean that's a lot of money. Uh, but anyway, they spend lots of money on defense and other things. Well, that's good, but look, you're only bringing in $2.4 million from taxes, payroll taxes, individual income taxes, corporate taxes. So um, you're not bringing in enough money to pay for yourself every year. So that's a federal deficit, and you put all those together, and you have what's called a national deficit, a national debt. So right now, here's what our national debt is: $36 trillion, and this is building every second, and the interest is building on this. Just consider it a loan. You're loaning money out to other people. So this is happening. This you see this changing all the time. This is uh, continuing to change. So you can see things like what President Trump has tried to do with cutting out some of the agencies, cutting out waste, although it's been very harsh. You can see what he's trying to do is to cut down on spending. That does mean that we're going to lose some government programs. And but in the long run, it should help our nation um, become more solvent. I don't know that we'll ever be able to pay down $37 trillion in debt. Okay, let's see. Um, Continuing here, you can read about supply and demand, and we'll cover that again. Here's the section I want to make sure that you understand. there in a free market system, there are several types of competition that are allowed. There are four that I'm going to give you here. One is called perfect or pure competition. And so these are very specific in their definitions. There are many buyers, there are many sellers of a similar product, and no single buyer or seller is powerful enough to affect the price. A good example is agriculture. If I grow potatoes and you grow potatoes and we try to sell it to a retailer that sells potatoes, the one that has if all things are equal, the one that has the better price is going to end up making the sale, but they'll make less money. So generally, they don't have any ability to affect the price. The products are the same. Nobody's able to affect the price. Agriculture is the best example of pure competition. Most of the goods we buy are sold in monopolistic competition. There are a bunch of buyers, there are a bunch of sellers, but the products are differentiated. They're competing by something is different in my brand compared to your brand. So, why would I buy Libby's um, vegetables and not buy Del Monte's vegetables? Well, you've got to differentiate yourself from the other. And so, why would I buy an Android versus an Apple cell phone? Well, Apple has to differentiate themselves. And so, anyway, this is when you find most products out there, when you find they are trying to advertise what's different about their brand than somebody else's brand, that's because they're in monopolistic competition. An oligopoly, there are few sellers of a product. So they have control over the market. So like General Mills, Kellogg's, Post, you have just these few sellers of a product. Well, then they can keep a price at a certain amount. They don't try to compete on price. And if they were to compete on price, they'd all lose a certain amount of money. And then monopoly, of course, one seller, and monopolies are illegal in the US, but we still do have some monopolies, the old monopolies of the railroads and the oil trusts and things like that um, were broken up. And you still see, telephone companies and things like that be broken up today. But we still allow some monopolies in the United States, like Major League Baseball. They really have a monopoly. So anyway, monopolies, there's no substitute for the product. There's one seller. If there's only one seller, of course, they can charge whatever they want. The federal government does allow regulated or natural monopolies, like our utilities, for example. If we had 10 companies trying to supply electricity to our homes, we'd have wires run all over the place. So instead of doing it that way, we have regulated monopolies where the federal government regulates those companies. Okay, so I need you to know these four types of competition: perfect, monopolistic competition, oligopoly, and monopoly. And then at the end, I'm giving you a little rundown of the history of business in America. Definitely read through this. This is not all in the text. Um, so go back and look at, or read through here about the colonial period and how, people used to barter, exchange goods. Um, and the Industrial Revolution came along first in Great Britain, bringing the factory system in, and then then it was brought over to the United States, and of course the that's where all of the growth in our production and GDP started to happen, right? So when we started seeing um, more manufacturing, using the factoring system, assembly lines, that sort of stuff. So read about that, read about specialization. Um, of course, if you can teach people to do one particular task instead of having them go from task to task to task, if they have to build, if you had to build a car by yourself and you had to put on each piece and make sure it worked, you'd be there forever. But if you ran it down an assembly line and each person put on a piece, and what they were an expert in that job, that's what I'm talking about with specialization. Um, okay, so anyway, read about that. Of course, this is the Industrial Revolution, the first and the second Industrial Revolution. Um, really drove this country into prosperity. So anyway, read about that, read about the Great Depression, where we were in the 20th century, where we are now, and how that we have become a service economy here in the U.S. So anyway, for every one of these chapters, I'll try to give you a little overview, and hopefully you'll read more about this kind of stuff in the online text for a supplement. And of course, you can ask questions anytime you need to.